Neighbor, how is your garden growing? Me, today in my garden, well, I am getting ready to restart my vegetable garden beds. And I thought it would be the perfect time to take you guys through some of the most asked questions when it comes to starting your first vegetable garden, or restarting a vegetable garden, or maybe starting your first successful vegetable garden. So I'm gonna take you through basics and fundamentals to get you started on the right path so that you can create the garden of your dreams right here in the Sunshine State. First question maybe is, what should I be growing? The easy answer is stuff you would eat. But if you're new to the whole vegetable gardening world and not necessarily used to thinking through this way, I'm gonna give you some easy suggestions for places to start. One, lettuce. Lots of people eat salads. It's pretty easy to grow. Lettuce is one of those easy ones to grow that can save you a lot of money pretty quickly. So if you're into growing vegetables because you want to save money, lettuce is a great one. Two, tomatoes. Whether you eat them fresh, whether you eat them in pizza sauce, tomato sauce, or salsa, you should be growing tomatoes. And I feel like tomatoes is one of those plants that gets people converted into eating a lot more fresh because the tomatoes you grow at home just tend to taste a lot better. Is there science behind that, or is it just opinion? Only you can find out once you start growing your own tomatoes. Now, once we leave these two, it can start to go a lot of different ways. Now, from what do people use a lot of, but they probably don't realize it? That's gonna be onions. But if you kind of want something that looks good in the garden, lots of really dark green salads, or you like to do smoothies, you might want to get into kale. If you want a plant that can be used in a lot of different ways, from collecting the sprouts to using the leaves in stews to something that you actually recognize, that would be broccoli. Now, if it's one of those ones that you want to just grab fresh from the garden, you might also want to consider something like carrots. And of course, a classic bell pepper is a general favorite for a lot of people. Now, beyond that, it starts to get more into everybody's personal diets. We can think about eggplants and radishes and beets, but now it's not as clear if it's going to be something you like unless you know you like these items. And if you want something really simple to start with, go ahead and throw in beans with it. Okay, next question. Do you need raised beds? You see all these fancy gardeners on Instagram and YouTube and everywhere with these big raised beds. Should you start with those? And my answer is gonna be, no, I wouldn't start there. If you are brand new to vegetable gardening, I would be considering thinking about starting with something simpler like grow bags. One, they're a lot cheaper. Two, you may not know what the best place to put a vegetable garden is in your garden, or you could do some larger pots like 3 gallon, 5 gallon, 10 gallon. The nice thing about these is, one, they tend to be cheaper. Two, it doesn't take as much soil to fill them. And three, as you kind of learn your garden, you can move them around. Move them to a sunnier spot, move them to a shadier spot, move it to a spot where it gets more rain, move it to a spot that stays a little bit drier, move it inside because it's getting too cold, move it to a shadier spot because it's too hot. Having something that you can move around will help you as you are learning without committing to building something really big and that's really hard to move. Whether you're going to be in ground, slightly below ground, above ground, or in a container, there is a couple measurements you need to think about, and that's going to be 6 to 18 inches. Of all the vegetables that you're going to grow, their roots go 6 inches to 18 inches down. How deep depends on what the plant is. A lettuce, an onion, they only go about 6 inches deep. Even if you have a super deep bed that goes like way up here, most of the nutrition, the water, everything that plant's going to get is only in the first 6 inches, and everything else, well, it's just kind of dead space. Now, if you're growing things like tomatoes and broccoli, their roots can get all the way down to 18 inches, which is why if you're gonna do a raised garden bed that's closed on the bottom, you need it to be about 18 inches deep. And the same goes for if you're gonna do something like grow bags or potted plants, you wanna think deep rather than wide. Next question might be, what kind of plants do I just start wherever they're gonna go versus I see lots of people starting things in trays? So when it comes to starting in place, it's gonna be kind of those crops that, well, the root is the thing you're going for. That's gonna be carrots, beets, and radishes. You're gonna wanna start them wherever they're gonna grow. Now, the things that you're gonna probably wanna start in tray, well, they're gonna tend to be the things that take a lot longer to get going, and they kind of need the right kind of something to get going. That's gonna be things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. Also consider things like broccoli, cabbages, cauliflower, kale. And then there's some things that are kind of in between that you could start them in a tray, you could start them in bed. That would be things like onions. Lettuces are one of those ones that could go either way. You could start them in a tray and then move them, or you could just seed them in place. I've done that before too. And honestly, one of the tricks to know which way to go on this is how many seeds are in the packet. You'll notice things like lettuce and carrots. When you get the seed packets, you have so many seeds. And then you get your tomato packet and it seems like there's just 12, 16 seeds in there. If they have very few seeds, start them in a tray. If they have tons of seeds, start them out in the bed. The next thing you may be wondering is, okay, I got a grow bag, I got a raised garden bed, I got a pot, I got a grow bag. What kind of soil do I put in it? When it comes to soil, first off, I'm always all about just keep it simple. And depending on where you live and what you have access to, one of the most common brands for everybody is gonna be Miracle-Gro. Now, I'm not saying this is the best soil in the world. I'm just saying it's one that's the most accessible to people. And so therefore, I would just say, let's start there. And you could always work your way into more expensive things later on. Now, when it comes to if you're doing it literally on the ground or in a raised garden bed, you're gonna wanna look for something that says garden bed soil. If it's in a pot, you wanna use potting soil. And if you're going to be putting something in a tray to start seeds, you want to use seed starting mix. The next question you might have is, how deep do I put my seeds? How far apart do I put my seeds? Well, the easy trick is however big it is, double the size of the seed, that's how deep. So if the seed is really teeny tiny, you know, I'm thinking things like onions and lettuces and even tomatoes, you're barely scraping the surface. You're making just a tiny, 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 teeny, tiny little hole, and then you're just sprinkling dirt right on top of them. Now, when it comes to things like beans, pumpkin seeds, those tend to be a whole inch deep. So you're gonna be like, you're gonna make a hole, put it in, cover it up. I would say as a general rule of thumb that I have learned is when you read the instructions on the back of a seed packet, which will tell you how deep you should do it, I tended to go deeper than what was recommended, or even if I went with what was recommended, it tended to be too far. So I would recommend go a little bit less, not more. The next thing you may wanna know is how far apart am I supposed to put my seeds, or can I just sprinkle them wherever? You have the option to sprinkle them wherever. That is a way to do gardening. The challenge, I will say, for most beginners is that we're not good at the thing that you need to do to get a really good harvest if you just throw everything anywhere, and that is thinning. Thinning is where you literally look at your baby plants and you say, some of you gotta go. Y'all are too close. And because we tend to be really bad at that as beginners, because it's our first sprouts and we can't dare get rid of it, I would recommend you follow spacing guidelines. Now, a lot of the spacing guidelines are for like farmers and you and me. While we are kind of backyard farmers, front yard farmers, side yard farmers, we're not like really farmers. We don't need to make space for big machinery to get in between our crops. We just, you know, we can walk around, it's fine. So therefore, the general rule of thumb is a lot of your cold weather crops like beets, radishes, onions, lettuces, those all are about 3 to 6 inches apart. If you're not sure, kind of lean towards 6 inches when you first get started. Your kind of big cold weather crops, I'm talking about your broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbages, kale, Brussels sprouts, those ones are gonna want to be about 18 inches apart, if not 2 feet apart. I know, it doesn't feel, especially in the beginning, like they should be that far apart until they get like towards like getting big, and then you're later gonna be like, oh wow, I shouldn't have planted them so close. When it comes to a lot of our warm weather crops, I'm talking about peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, beans. Those ones are gonna be in that 18 inches to 2 feet apart. Now you may say, but what if I wanna push it? I've heard from other people I should push it and put them really close. I would tell you again, don't do that. And here's the reason why. Initially, that's gonna feel pretty good because you're gonna see a lot more stuff there. And again, you're probably not gonna be great at thinning in the beginning. I know, I've been there, so many others. Let me know in the comments if you have tried and not been able to thin. The challenge is that if we don't thin, besides the fact there's like all this nutrition issues, lots of people get into science. The big thing is when there's too many leaves too close together, it's really easy for bugs to get in and lay eggs and eat. And it's really hard for your natural pest control, the birds, the other critters who will eat the bugs off the plant, to see them or access them. So therefore, your crops can very quickly go from looking really cute and having lots of them to being completely eaten down. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying, and we're gonna keep going with tips here, but I would love to hear from y'all who've started before. What kind of things were you so sure were gonna work and then later learn, no, nope, that was not a good idea. Please share in the comments so all of the beginners, all the new people, and all the people who want to get lots of harvest can learn down below. We're talking about mix, we talk about spacing. Okay, the next one, the tricky one, how often to water. Now this is gonna depend. And that's what makes it kind of tricky to answer. It depends kind of on three different things. One, how good is your soil? Like, does it have a lot of organic matter in it, or is it very sandy? Does it have a lot of clay in it? The reason is like basically what you're trying to understand is like, how well does it hold on? Now, some people will say you can send your soil into some scientific place and it'll give you lots of information, and that is an option. But you might be like me, I'm like, let's just try things. Let's just do things. And that's also an option. So one of the things you want to look for is how well does this dirt stick together? Like this one, like look at this. This is hard clumps. This one wants to stick together and it's still pretty dry. Versus a lot of the soil I have in my garden, it is so sandy, if I lift it up right now, it will just blow away the wind and my hand will be totally clean. Now, if your soil tends to be an inch deep and it stays pretty moist from the natural environment, from your sprinklers running however often they run, then that's one place. If you're a place where it dries out so fast, that's another place. So that's one factor. How fast does your soil dry out? Sandy soil dries out faster because sandy soil likes to drain. Clay soil, or you live just in an area that has a lot of moisture, likes to hold on to water. We're over here. The next part is how old is the plant? Teeny tiny babies with no roots need water regularly because they don't have like anywhere to put water. So it's kind of like a literal baby. Like they take a little sip and then they're out of water within like a minute, and then they take another sip. And if you're not providing water to them regularly, then they just like shrivel up and die. So in the beginning, when it's a baby plant, we need to water more often versus once it's like a nice 6 inches, 1 foot plant, then we don't have to usually water as often because it's got lots of roots. It can reach lots of places. So depending on your soil, depending on how old the plant is, and then depending on your environment. I live in Florida, it rains a lot. If you live in Arizona, it doesn't rain a lot. So the general rule of thumb that I do is when I'm first starting baby seedlings, I tend to run the sprinklers, the water in the area 3 times a week. Once everything's kind of like this tall, we're definitely back at 2, but it can vary. So this is why you actually in the beginning kind of need to watch things. And if you're in a pot, if it doesn't have like a watering tray, like you need to go out there and refresh the water probably every other day. But in the beginning, it can be a lot of water. So as a good starting pot place is with your seeds, I would probably try to water every other day until you start seeing sprouts, and then you start to back off slowly. Now watering, the other thing you might need to know about watering that I had to learn the hard way. I live in Florida. When it does rain, it can rain like, woo, monsoon. So when you're watering your plants with like a hose, let's not be like the monsoon. We need to be like the gentle rain coming down on our baby plants, because the monsoon, you get out your soaker hose, you got it on fire hydrant setting, you'll crush your babies. You need to have it like gentle. I always imagine like, you ever seen the movie Bambi? You know, they sing the little like drip, drip, drop with the April shower. That song? Okay, that's like what we want. We want like little drippy, oh, isn't it beautiful? That's what we do in the beginning. It needs to be gentle. It's not smashing anything. It's not taking the dirt and dumping it on top of the seed. So even though you put it the right depth, it doesn't go way deep. Now, your next question may be, this feels very challenging. This feels like I'm a little overwhelmed. And I don't know that I can vegetable garden now that you said all these things. Well, if you're really a beginner, let me tell you this. Other than like the soil part and the bed part, you can kind of like jump ahead. Like you don't have to start with seeds in the beginning. I know it's like the most cost-effective way. I know that everyone tells you it's the best way with the best varieties. Here's the thing. In the beginning, just buy plants. Now someone over here will be like, that's not as cost effective. I know, but it's been your first time, your second time, maybe your third time. And if you haven't been able to do it by seed, let's go just buy a plant. Let's just think about buying a plant and digging a hole and putting it in the ground. There are so many skills to learn in order to be able to get hundreds and hundreds of pounds of harvest that sometimes it's okay. And oftentimes, here's the thing. If you pick the right varieties, even though it might not save you the most money, it can still save you a lot of money. And you'll be growing your own fresh food. And it's putting you on the path of one day you will be able to seed start. You will get to those hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And if you're wondering to yourself, what variety should I grow? Well, I know for me, who lives in zone 10, and those who are watching in like the zone 8s, the zone 9s, the zone 10s, the people who live in the south, there is a challenge of trying to grow the right kind of tomatoes, the right kind of onions, the right kind of broccoli that will work for us. And here's the thing, I've got a whole list for free right here that you can download so that you can learn what are the best varieties to start with, whether you can buy them or start them from seed. And once you grab that, if you're wondering to yourself, I think I'm gonna try starting some seeds, but in a tray, go ahead and check out this video right here. I'm gonna take you through the step-by-step, the nitty-gritty details to get your seed started for the very first time. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.